The US-China trade war reached a fever pitch on April 9, 2025, when the Trump administration imposed a staggering 104% tariff on Chinese goods. This unprecedented move sent shockwaves through the global economy. The tariffs, covering a wide range of products, were the culmination of months of escalating tensions between the two economic giants. Trump argued that these tariffs were necessary to protect American jobs and punish China for unfair trade practices. But critics warned of dire consequences, predicting a global recession and a breakdown in international trade. The immediate impact was swift and brutal. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted over 1,000 points, wiping out trillions of dollars in market value. Investors panicked, dumping stocks and seeking refuge in safe haven assets like gold. The tariffs marked a significant escalation in the trade war, pushing the two nations closer to the brink of a full-blown economic conflict. The 104% tariff was not an isolated event. It was the latest salvo in a trade war that had been raging for months. The conflict began in early 2025, with Trump imposing a 10% tariff on a range of Chinese imports. This initial move was met with immediate retaliation from Beijing, which slapped tariffs on American goods. In March 2025, Trump raised the stakes, increasing tariffs to 34% on a wider range of Chinese products. China responded in kind, targeting American agricultural products and other key exports. The back-and-forth tariff hikes created uncertainty and instability in the global market, as businesses struggled to adapt to the constantly shifting trade landscape. The escalating trade war threatened to unravel decades of economic integration between the world's two largest economies. China's retaliation went beyond matching US tariffs. They strategically targeted a key American vulnerability: rare earth minerals. These minerals are essential components in a vast array of modern technologies, from smartphones and electric vehicles to military hardware and renewable energy systems. And China, controlling up to 90% of the global supply, holds a near monopoly on these critical resources. In a calculated move, Beijing announced restrictions on rare earth exports to the US, requiring American companies to obtain licenses. This move was widely seen as a disguised export ban, designed to cripple key American industries reliant on these materials. The rare earth restrictions sent shockwaves through the tech sector, defense industry, and renewable energy companies, exposing the United States' dependence on China for these vital resources. Section 4. Global Markets Reel. The fallout from the trade war was felt far beyond the borders of the United States and China. Global markets went into a tailspin as investors grappled with the escalating tensions and the specter of a global recession. The S&P 500, a key indicator of the US stock market, plunged into a bear market, down over 20% from its recent peak. Asian markets were hit particularly hard. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index plummeted over 13%, while the Shanghai Composite Index shed over 7%, wiping out billions of dollars in market value. The Japanese Nikkei 225 and South Korea's Kospi Index also experienced sharp declines. The trade war triggered a global flight to safety, with investors seeking refuge in less risky assets. Section 5. The US feels the pinch. While the trade war was ostensibly aimed at protecting American jobs and businesses, the reality on the ground was far more complex. American farmers, already struggling with low commodity prices and extreme weather events, were caught in the crossfire. China, once a major importer of American soybeans, pork, and other agricultural products, slapped retaliatory tariffs, decimating American agricultural exports. Small businesses across the US also felt the pinch. Many relied on imported goods from China, and the tariffs forced them to raise prices, cut costs, or shut down altogether. The trade war fueled uncertainty and eroded consumer confidence, leading to decreased spending and economic slowdown. Section 6. The world reacts. The international community watched the escalating trade war with growing alarm. The European Union, Japan, and Canada, all major trading partners of both the US and China, issued sharp rebukes of Trump's tariffs, warning of the dangers of protectionism and the potential for a global economic downturn. The World Trade Organization, WTO, also voiced its concerns, urging both sides to resolve their differences through dialogue and negotiation. The trade war threatened to undermine the rules-based international trading system that had underpinned global economic growth for decades. America was riding high, the economy was a well-oiled machine, unemployment was low, businesses were booming, but dark clouds were gathering, whispers of tariffs filled the air, the warning signs were there, but who wants to listen to economists? They're like the weatherman, always predicting doom and gloom. Except this time, the doom was man-made, and the man was about to take a swing. Not at a golf ball, mind you, at the global economy. April 5, 2025, the day the music died, or at least started skipping really badly. Trump, on his 14th hole at a Saudi-funded golf course, decided to launch his Liberation Day tariffs. Liberation from what? Prosperity, common sense, basic economics? The Dow Jones took a nosedive, plummeting over 1,200 points. Experts predicted a recession. Trump, meanwhile, was probably celebrating a hole-in-one. Because nothing says I care about the American people like ignoring an economic meltdown while on a golf course built with foreign money. Remember those booming businesses? Not so booming anymore. Apple, Tesla, Qualcomm, Whirlpool, all hammered by a 34% tax on exports to China. Small businesses, the backbone of America, buckled under the weight of increased costs. Suddenly, that Made in America sticker came with a hefty price tag. But hey, at least we showed China who's boss, right? Section 4. The price we pay. Empty pockets and shattered dreams. What happens when businesses struggle? Consumers suffer. Prices on everything from groceries to cars skyrocketed. Families struggled to put food on the table. The American dream started to look more like a nightmare. But Trump, ever the optimist, had a message for the American people. Only the weak lose. Inspiring, isn't it? Like a coach telling his team, just don't be losers, as they're getting crushed 50-0. Section 5, the people's verdict, from hashtags to the streets. The American people had enough. Protests erupted across the country. Social media exploded with #Trump is destroying America and #resist Trump. Even Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, emerged from his lair to criticize Trump's economic policies. He called them what they were, harmful to working families and businesses. But Trump, as usual, dismissed the criticism. Because when you're a billionaire who inherited his fortune, who needs facts or experts? Section 6, Fox News bites the hand that fed it. Even Fox News, Trump's loyal propaganda machine, couldn't ignore the economic carnage. They called the tariffs a poorly executed disaster. Commentators who once sang Trump's praises were now singing a different tune, one of regret and disillusionment. One commentator even admitted on air, "I believed in this, and tonight, I feel like a sucker." And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the sound of cognitive dissonance meeting reality. It's not a pretty sound. The question remains, can Trump fix this mess? Or is he too busy blaming everyone else, the Democrats, the media, China, the caddy who gave him the wrong club on the 14th hole, to actually do something about it? Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, the American people are paying the price for his incompetence. And that price is getting higher every day.
Tariffs are essentially taxes on imported goods. They are designed to make foreign products more expensive. This encourages consumers to buy American-made goods instead. However, tariffs often have unintended consequences that can hurt the very people they are supposed to help. When the cost of imported materials rises, so does the cost of producing goods. These increased production costs are passed down to consumers in the form of higher prices. This means that everyday items like groceries, clothing, and electronics become more expensive for everyone. The idea behind tariffs is to protect American jobs and businesses from foreign competition. While tariffs might seem like a simple solution, they often create more problems than they solve. The global economy is interconnected. Tariffs disrupt these connections and can have far-reaching consequences. The impact of tariffs is felt most keenly by ordinary Americans. When tariffs are imposed on imported goods, the cost of these goods increases. This means that consumers end up paying more for the same products they were buying before. For example, tariffs on imported steel and aluminum have increased the cost of producing cars, appliances, and even beer. These price hikes are then passed on to consumers. Families find themselves struggling to afford basic necessities. The electronics industry is also heavily impacted by tariffs. Many electronic components are manufactured overseas. Tariffs on these components increase the cost of producing smartphones, computers, and other devices. This makes these essential tools less accessible to students, small businesses, and everyday consumers. The tariffs have a ripple effect throughout the economy. As prices increase, consumers cut back on spending. This reduced demand can lead to job losses in various sectors. The tariffs, intended to protect American jobs, can end up hurting the very workers they were meant to help. One of the biggest unintended consequences of tariffs is job losses. While tariffs are intended to protect American jobs, they can actually lead to job losses in various sectors. When tariffs make imported materials more expensive, American companies face higher production costs. To offset these costs, companies may be forced to lay off workers or even shut down factories. This is particularly true for industries that rely heavily on imported materials, such as manufacturing and agriculture. The tariffs create an uneven playing field. Another unintended consequence of tariffs is business flight. To avoid the higher costs associated with tariffs, some companies may choose to move their production facilities overseas. This means that American jobs and investment are lost to other countries. The tariffs can also make it difficult for American companies to compete in the global market. When American goods become more expensive, foreign consumers may choose to buy from other countries. This can harm American businesses and lead to job losses in export-dependent industries. In 2025, President Trump announced sweeping new tariffs on goods from around the world. He called it Liberation Day, claiming that the tariffs would free America from unfair trade practices. However, many economists and business leaders warned that the tariffs would backfire, hurting American consumers and businesses. The tariffs, averaging 29% with some as high as 40%, represent the largest tax increase since the Revenue Act of 1968. They have added hundreds of billions of dollars to the cost of imported goods. These costs are ultimately passed on to American consumers. The tariffs have been met with swift retaliation from trading partners like China, the European Union, and Canada. These countries have imposed their own tariffs on American goods, targeting key industries like agriculture and manufacturing. This tit-for-tat trade war has created uncertainty in the global economy. The tariffs have had a negative impact on the stock market, with the S&P 500 dropping 5% immediately after the announcement. Major companies like Walmart and Delta Airlines have withdrawn their earnings guidance. Experts warn of a potential recession with rising inflation and unemployment. The use of tariffs as a tool of economic policy is not new. Throughout history, countries have used tariffs to protect domestic industries, raise revenue, and influence the behavior of trading partners. However, history has shown time and again that tariffs often have unintended consequences. One of the most infamous examples is the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. This act, signed into law during the Great Depression, raised tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods. The goal was to protect American jobs and businesses, but the act backfired spectacularly. Instead of helping the American economy, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act exacerbated the Great Depression. The tariffs provoked retaliatory tariffs from other countries. This led to a global trade war that crippled international trade and deepened the economic downturn. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of protectionist trade policies. It highlights how tariffs intended to protect domestic industries can ultimately harm the very people they are supposed to help. The international community has reacted with a mixture of dismay and anger to the Trump administration's tariffs. Key trading partners like China, the European Union, and Canada have all condemned the tariffs and vowed to retaliate. This has raised fears of a global trade war. China, the world's second-largest economy, has been particularly vocal in its opposition to the tariffs. The Chinese government has accused the United States of protectionism and threatened to impose retaliatory tariffs on American goods. This trade war between the world's two largest economies has created uncertainty and volatility in the global market. The European Union, a bloc of 27 countries, has also been critical of the Trump administration's tariffs. The EU has threatened to impose its own tariffs on American goods, targeting key industries like agriculture and manufacturing. The trade tensions between the United States and the EU have strained relations between the two longtime allies. The tariffs have also drawn criticism from international organizations like the World Trade Organization. The WTO has warned that the tariffs violate international trade rules and could lead to a global trade war. The WTO has urged the United States to resolve its trade disputes through dialogue and negotiation. President Trump announced sweeping tariffs on all imports. This sent shockwaves through global markets. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged by over 1,000 points. This was the biggest single-day drop in its history. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq followed suit, plummeting 3.7% and 5% respectively. This day, dubbed Liberation Day by the president, quickly became a symbol of economic turmoil and uncertainty. The tariffs, 10% on all imports and a staggering 25% on cars, were met with widespread condemnation from economists and business leaders alike. The immediate market reaction reflected a deep fear of a global trade war. Investors fled to safe havens like gold and government bonds. The CBOE Volatility Index, a measure of market fear, spiked to levels not seen since the 2008 financial crisis. The suddenness and severity of the market crash underscored the global interconnectedness of the modern economy. It served as a stark warning of the potential consequences of protectionist trade policies. The White House defended the tariffs as necessary to protect American jobs and industries. They argued that decades of unfair trade practices had hollowed out the U.S. manufacturing sector. They believed these tariffs would revitalize American industry. However, many experts warned that the tariffs would ultimately harm American consumers and businesses. They argued that the tariffs would lead to higher prices, job losses, and slower economic growth. This move marked a significant escalation in President Trump's trade war. It signaled a disregard for the warnings of economists and the pleas of international allies. The aftershocks of Liberation Day continue to reverberate. The world is now bracing for a protracted period of economic uncertainty. The economic fallout from the tariffs was swift and severe. Economists projected that the average U.S. tariff rate would reach 29%, the highest since the 1930s. This increase in import costs was expected to ripple through the economy, impacting businesses and consumers alike. The burden of these tariffs would fall squarely on American families, with estimates suggesting an additional $3,800 in annual expenses for a middle-class household. The tariffs threatened key sectors of the U.S. economy. The automotive industry, already grappling with declining sales, faced a particularly heavy blow. The 25% tariff on imported cars was projected to increase prices by $5,000 to $7,000 per vehicle, potentially pushing them out of reach for many American consumers. This price hike threatened jobs not only in car manufacturing but also in dealerships, repair shops, and related industries. The agricultural sector, a crucial pillar of the U.S. economy, also faced significant challenges. Retaliatory tariffs from China and other countries targeted key agricultural exports like soybeans, pork, and dairy products. These tariffs squeezed American farmers, who were already struggling with low commodity prices and a prolonged trade war. The tariffs threatened to exacerbate these existing challenges, potentially leading to farm closures and job losses in rural communities. The tariffs also fueled inflation, eroding the purchasing power of American families. The rising costs of imported goods, from clothing and electronics to building materials and machinery, pushed up consumer prices across the board. This inflationary pressure further strained household budgets, particularly for low- and middle-income families. The combination of higher prices and economic uncertainty cast a shadow over the U.S. economy, raising concerns about a potential recession. The international community reacted to President Trump's tariffs with a mixture of condemnation and retaliation. The tariffs were widely seen as a violation of international trade norms and a threat to the global economic order. China, the European Union, Canada, and other major U.S. trading partners quickly announced retaliatory tariffs on a range of American goods. This escalation of trade tensions raised fears of a full-blown trade war, with potentially devastating consequences for the global economy. China, the primary target of President Trump's trade policies, responded with tariffs on $110 billion worth of U.S. goods. These tariffs, covering a wide range of products from soybeans and aircraft to chemicals and medical equipment, were carefully calibrated to inflict maximum pain on key U.S. industries and constituencies. The Chinese government also signaled its willingness to take further action if necessary, raising the stakes in the trade war. The European Union, another major U.S. trading partner, expressed its strong opposition to the tariffs. and threatened retaliatory measures of its own. The EU, which had already imposed tariffs on US goods in response to earlier trade actions, prepared to expand these tariffs to include a wider range of products, including iconic American brands. The EU also sought to strengthen its ties with other countries, seeking to diversify its trade relationships and reduce its reliance on the US. Canada, traditionally a close US ally and trading partner, responded with a mixture of disappointment and defiance. The Canadian government condemned the tariffs as unjustified and harmful to both countries' economies. They vowed to defend Canadian interests, announcing retaliatory tariffs on a range of US goods. The tariffs strained relations between the two countries, casting a shadow over their long history of economic cooperation. The political landscape in the United States has been significantly altered by these tariff policies. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have voiced their concerns, and the electorate is increasingly divided on the issue. The tariffs have not only impacted the economy, but have also become a contentious topic in political debates and campaigns. The ripple effects of these tariffs are being felt worldwide, with fears of a recession looming large. Economists warn that continued trade tensions could lead to global instability, affecting markets and economies far beyond the United States and China. The uncertainty has already led to fluctuations in stock markets and a slowdown in global trade. As we look to the future, the lasting impacts of these tariffs remain uncertain. Businesses are grappling with new realities and consumers are feeling the pinch. The long-term effects on international trade relationships and economic stability are still unfolding, leaving many to wonder what the future holds in this new era of trade policy.